Do you care if these bobbleheads are in your video? Hey guys, Scott here again with Trilogy Talk. This episode, I am in a new location. I've got Derek Brookard back in the house, but a little bit different. It's his house. We're in the Brookard studio today. So, as you saw in the intro, if you thought Derek just liked collecting discs, he's got another hobby as well. Tons and tons and tons of bobbleheads, which the amount of bobbleheads actually makes it look like his disc collection is very small. So, how many bobbleheads do you think you got?
Somewhere around 1,100 or so.
Ton of bobbleheads, so he's pretty into those. So if anybody,
no space left.
He's got no more space between discs and bobbleheads. So if anybody ever wants to get him something for disc golf that's not disc golf, like come Secret Santa Christmas time, bobbleheads. That's where you get them. So, but huge baseball fan, as you can see above us. Lots of Royals stuff, lots of Brewers stuff, lots of White Sox stuff, right? Is there any other teams missing that you highly collect?
I don't. I used to be a huge Frank Thomas fan. That's where some of the White Sox stuff comes in. We're big Royals fans. Mainly big Royals fans.
Yeah, they attend a lot of games, him and his family. So we're on a different couch, so I got to get used to the soft, sinky, comfy couch, so we're a little bit further back. So, but topic at hand. Today, we are talking about discs that get discontinued. Why do discs get discontinued? What kind of things do the manufacturers look at for a disc to be discontinued? Trilogy Challenge discs. I've seen a lot of comments online where people reference that they think Trilogy Challenge discs get discontinued more than other discs. So we're going to kind of talk about some of those a little bit, and really it's our opinions. Some of it is we've read from different people within the manufacturing part within Trilogy, but it's still our interpretation, so definitely could be off on a little bit, but I think for the most part it's pretty accurate. So, all right, Derek, so why do you think that discs get discontinued to begin with, especially discs that people think are popular? I mean, what makes you think the reason why a disc gets discontinued?
I think there's a few reasons for that. One obviously is definitely, well, first and foremost is obviously popularity. And that's not to say a disc isn't necessarily popular, but popular as in people carry it, and popular as in people are constantly having to replace it, are a different thing. Obviously the Trident's a great example, one that probably is first and foremost in most people's mind. I carried a Trident for 3 or 4 years. I know multiple people who carried the Trident, but I feel like it was always carried as a utility style disc.
Right.
And it's, I think in 4 years of carrying a Trident in my bag, I never had to replace it one time. It's a disc you use for so many different types of shots, but it's not a disc you use for long distance shots over the water or things like that are going to put you in a position where that disc disappears.
And the Trident even gets better with age,
right?
As it gets more beat in,
right? So that's definitely a factor. I think time is a factor. As the disc gets older and more molds come out, they tend to be overshadowed by other things. As more golfers come into the sport, they're more quickly introduced to the new molds that are coming out.
Yep.
And so maybe a mold like, just recently I was actually just talking today at the warehouse with a couple of the guys on the floor about the fuse, and they were talking about how the fuse is kind of coming back. And it's coming back, I feel like, because now you got guys like Johnny McRae and Jordan Castro and stuff who are really talking it up. So a lot of these newer players and newer people into the sport are now revisiting an old mold. Or maybe players that couldn't throw that mold when they first started now are revisiting that mold, and they're hearing about that mold, and it's bringing it back. Whereas, you know, a lot of those molds like that, if you don't have hype behind them and stuff, a lot of players have never even thrown one. They've never even tried one. They don't, and as a result, you know, a lot of these molds start to disappear. You know, there's only so much space in the warehouse. There's only so much shelf space. Latitude can only produce so many discs a year, and at some point they have to say, okay, what discs are the most beneficial and what discs are being thrown by the most people.
Right.
So, you know, what can we cut out of our lineup? Yeah. And I think there's a big difference between, a lot of people don't understand out of production and discontinued.
Right.
Out of production simply means it's not scheduled or slated to be produced on the production schedule that is set for the next year or 2 years. It doesn't mean it's never coming back.
Right.
It doesn't mean they're throwing the mold away and it can never happen again.
It's on a break.
And yes, a lot of times that break could be indefinite.
Sure.
But it doesn't mean, you know, hey, there will never be another Trident made, or there will never be another Thief made, or whatever, you know, the most current ones are.
Well, there are a lot of discs that have gone out. I mean, even through multiple manufacturers that have been discontinued, and then they've come back for various things. And sometimes it's a disc that doesn't get produced a lot, or doesn't, like the Trident as an example, where it was something that they went out of production. They didn't make those any longer for a long time, and then they made a special edition for those. Sometimes they'll bring back a disc, and you'll sometimes see it on like the Latitude 64 factory store, where a disc you haven't seen in a really long time, or you've seen very, very minimal runs, that they'll do a run. Sometimes people don't know is that Discontinuing not only is also deals with sales and popularity, but also for the ease of how that mold is made. Some molds are made easier than others. So sometimes we get popular molds like the Soft Justice as an example. Cenis, I think, over time has had a few issues from my understanding. The EMAC Truth, like the Lucid X EMAC Truth, Trespass. I mean, sometimes they have a problem making those, and it's not that they don't sell well, it's just that the amount of time they spend making them versus and discarding ones that don't work are also something that gets factored in there. But sometimes they'll utilize those instead of just discontinuing them to use them at a later date, or as technology progresses, they can get better at making that specific mold.
I think the Soft Justice is a great example. You know, there's a lot of people out there who just, you know, they keep pushing, why can't we have a Soft Justice? Why can't we have a Soft Justice? Why can't we have a Soft Justice? And the fact is, and I don't know all the details of it, but my understanding of it is the Soft Justice, when they would make a run, they were having trouble with the run, and it's not cost efficient and beneficial for them to have to take, you know, 5 or 10 attempts at it to get a full run of 15 and then recycle 4,500 that didn't turn out the way they wanted to or whatever, you know. At some point they just have to accept, okay, this doesn't want to be made in soft plastic. Mm-hmm. It doesn't like being made in soft plastic, and what it takes to make it in soft plastic maybe just isn't worth, you know, the cost and the effort that it takes to get. I mean, they don't want to just send 300 of them over here because 1,200 of them didn't turn out or whatever.
It's kind of a teaser.
And unfortunately, that's, you know, I think what we saw with the Soft Justice. So.
Yep, I think something else that a lot of people. So, you know, we get a lot of people who are on Facebook, and you'll hear a disc getting discontinued or out of production, and everybody kind of goes up in arms and is disappointed about a disc that's they've heard isn't going to be made any longer. They don't understand it because all their friends and people that are close to them on Facebook or whatever their social media platform is love that disc. So as far as they see is it's a very popular disc, when really the big picture against everything DD Westside and Latitude sell between their big box stores, all the brick and mortar stores, the online stores, a lot of times what you see is such a small, minute amount of what sells. And I know me and Derek are fortunate enough that we go to the Emporia warehouse pretty regularly, and sometimes we can see those discs that we'll see people talk about that are popular, but we see they don't move on the shelves for a long periods of time. I mean, even people talk about super soft judges. I just saw super soft judges, you know, over on the TFR side. Now, there's not a whole lot left, but people have been looking for them. They're still there.
Well,
They've been
that's-
on the order forms. But again, people complain about them being discontinued, but they're still sitting there a year later after they haven't put them there any longer.
Yeah, absolutely. The Opto Trident, the Gold Line Trident took forever and a day to sell out, but the Opto Trident in general, the same run of Opto Trident sat on the shelf down there for probably 19, 20 months.
Air Truce.
Straight. Air Truce, great example. They made them in 2014. They didn't run out till early 2017?
Probably,
and there was 2,000 of them made. Yes, for those who love the disc, and, now, it's tougher to find them because there is only so many out there. But the Opto Trident was just not a disc that people were frequently needing. And people don't understand that. The percentage of people on Facebook even that went to bat and argued that the Trident shouldn't go out of production was about 2% of the number of fans on the fan page on Facebook. 2%. Yeah, it seems like a lot when you see 200 people arguing for the Trident, but that's 200 people on a page that has over 10,000 members.
Yep.
You have 200 people arguing on behalf of the Trident. And in the grand scheme of things, when you look at all the brick and mortar stores in production, worldwide for these discs, 2% is just not enough to keep a disc on a shelf,
Right.
And it's another thing I think people question is plastics. I hear a lot of people arguing for fluid plastic, for example. Well, we all know fluid plastic sat on the shelves forever. Yep. It was not the easiest thing to move.
It's super hard to sell.
It didn't move frequently. If you loved it, you loved it. If you hated it, you hated it.
Mm-hmm.
But
not
the other thing is there's a lot of things that factor in a lot of times to plastics going out of production. Another example I hear people argue a lot, hey, can we get the Seafoam Moonshine back? We love the Seafoam Moonshine. Well, there's a lot of things that go into that. And what I've been told and what I understand regarding that is that plastic is out of production, not because they didn't like the plastic or because fans didn't like the plastic, but because the manufacturer that they use for the plastic is no longer the same manufacturer being used.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that factor in. It could just be as simple as we ran out of the plastic finally, and we no longer use the distributor of that plastic.
Right. They've changed distributors for whatever reason, or that distributor no longer carries it.
Right. So there's a lot of things that go into those decisions, and it's not always as cut and dry and easy as they want it to be.
Right. So what are some of the discs that in the past we've lost discs like the Trident, the Blitz, the Fugitive. What are some of the older ones? Those three are the biggest ones that pop off the top of my head now that I'm going to put them on the spot.
Riot's gone.
The Riot.
The Vision is gone.
Striker?
I don't know.
Striker's still there?
Striker's still there.
So, and then recently, on Jeremy, when they did their monthly report, and then Tomas just posted this, so they talked about the Thief.
Right, Jeremy had mentioned the Thief, the Sampo and the Sling, and then he had mentioned that he would wait for Latitude to announce their own molds. Now, he did say none of those molds are set in stone. Those are the ones they're leaning towards taking out of production. He also mentioned that he did not know if there would ever be a set in stone list this time. It may just be you slowly start to see these disappear off the shelf.
Right. And some of that set in stone too is because they have that exclusive program. So they're kind of protecting themselves.
I did reach out to Thomas and ask him directly if he minded sharing the information on the Latitude molds. And he again said nothing is set in stone at this point. There had been rumor that the Makana was going out. He kind of hinted that was not going anywhere. He putts with the Makana currently. But he did mention some molds that would be going out. I was a little shocked at one or two of them, but the Falchion, which I don't think anybody was super shocked by. The Triple X kind of shocked me. The Scythe was on the list. The Halo, which is a very old Latitude driver, was on the list. And then the core and the mace were on the list for mid ranges.
And I know quite a few people that throw the halo. So I'm kind of surprised with
and
that.
I think the core's kind of slowly gaining some popularity again. But again, these are you often see older molds in Trilogy Challenge molds. I agree with some people on that. I think the reason you see older molds, like I said, is just because as our sport grows and more players are introduced, they're automatically by default introduced to the newer things that come along.
Right.
It's not as often that they're being introduced to a blitz or something like that. Now, a lot of times these guys, if you can convince people to go back and revisit some of these old molds, or even yourself, maybe a halo didn't work for you when you started out because you didn't have the arm for a halo.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you don't have the arm for a halo now. Sometimes we need to go back and revisit old molds and see what works for us. And a lot of times you'll realize that a lot of these old molds are very good molds, Yeah. A lot of newer molds tend to start, as more and more molds come out, you start to overlap the older molds a little bit. And because the new molds gain the steam, the older molds kind of fall off a little bit.
In my case, I used to have the arm for them, or too much arm for them,
right?
Where I'd flip discs, and now I've gotten older and I don't have nearly the arm, so they might be perfect for me now.
Right.
Yep. And some of those discs, like he's talking about, whether it's Trilogy Challenge or those other discs, they also just sometimes have a slight overlap, depending on where they fall, basically on those flight chart categories and things like that. Sometimes there's an overlap, sometimes leaning towards one side or the other, and they're trying to fine tune that. And based on the sales and things like that, they are able to say, you know what, we would like to come up with a newer disc to go to our newer audience that will fit slightly better between these two gaps versus the disc that's already there, because one, we want to get a new product out, but also just because as technology has changed, plastics have changed, things like that, they're able to make that a better fit in between two discs, as an example.
Right.
On the Trilogy Challenge discs, so seems like some of those discs are the ones that get discontinued as well. Like we said, we've had the Sampo.
Sampo and Sling were both Trilogy Challenge
Trilogy.
discs. The Falchion was a Trilogy Challenge disc.
And there's several other ones
the
that
Thief
are...
was a Trilogy Challenge disc.
There's several others that probably aren't super popular, but one of the things, but what they're not is they're not popular to a lot of the people who are on that Facebook or even the Facebook fan page, because those are the people that have been playing for a while. A lot of the people that you see, at least publicly online, have been playing for a while. Not everybody. There's definitely a lot of new people that are coming in every day, but the audience, the people who are talking about it, I feel like are the ones that have been playing for a while. And they are better or have outgrown the arm speeds needed for a lot of those discs, because those discs are made for those very beginner players or slower arm players or things like that. I do think this year's Trilogy Challenge discs, I think, are going to have a little bit more stability, a little bit more fade, are going to be able to handle a little bit more power. So I'm kind of curious to see whether those discs become more relevant versus past Trilogy Challenge discs.
There's good and bad that comes from the Trilogy Challenge discs. I mean, for more established players, a lot of times those discs have less popularity, or more overlap with something perhaps already in their bag or whatever. But it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. The Trilogy Challenge discs are amazing for people being introduced to the game and newer players. And the past Trilogy Challenge discs are no different. The major difference we see is that as new players are introduced here in 2019, for instance, they're going to be introduced to the Vandal and items like that. But nobody's really going back and introducing them to the Claymore, or the Thief, or things like that. Those are all still great discs for people coming into the game, and would still have popularity as newer people are coming into the game if people were sent back to revisit them.
Right.
But new players are automatically introduced to new stuff.
Right.
And so, I mean, those are going to fall off. The core kind of has a similar flight to a Claymore, which maybe in turn has a similar flight to a Truth. And as new discs come out, the Sling, I think, had a very similar flight to those. And so as new discs come out, as you're appealing to newer players and beginners and things like that, those discs do tend to be overshadowed. the Trilogy Challenge is always aimed at the biggest audience it can be aimed at. The idea is that the discs are user friendly. They're discs that anybody can come to a Trilogy Challenge and have a chance to play and enjoy. Yep. They're not going to put an enforcer in the hand of some guy that's been playing for 2 weeks,
right?
Or who maybe this is his first tournament, so to speak.
Sure.
You know, so the Gatekeeper, I think, is probably one of the more overstable discs I've ever seen in a Trilogy Challenge.
Right.
So that is why you do slowly see a lot of those go out of production. But we've seen great things come from those too. I mean, the Shield was a Trilogy Challenge disc. Mm-hmm. It's an amazing putter. A lot of people use it. The Deputy, I mean, the Deputy is one of the most popular putters we've had in a long time. Yeah. I off the top of my head, everything's not coming to me as far as what were Trilogy Challenges.
Yeah, I was trying to go back and think of all of them to begin with. So,
but there's been a lot of really good Trilogy Challenge discs come along, and so I don't think it's fair to say that the Trilogy Challenge discs always suck or always go out of production. I don't think that's the case. It's just that as you continue to grow, you always have to have new things coming out that beginners can get their hands on and enjoy. And like I said, we don't tend to revisit old molds as much as we should.
Right.
It seems like it really takes somebody needs to put steam behind it in order for it to take off. You know, like I said, when a Jordan Castro or Johnny McRae starts really talking about an old mold like the Fuse, it's going to regain some popularity because now people, I mean, I can't count the number of customers I've had say, well, I've never even thrown a Fuse. What's the Fuse do?
Yeah.
And that's probably because they are newer to disc golf than the Fuse is.
Sure.
But now people like Johnny and Jordan have given them a reason to revisit or visit for the first time a mold that they've never visited before. And suddenly they're like, wow, what an amazing disc. You know?
Right.
And it's been there the whole time. You just haven't tried it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've introduced quite a few people to the Fuse. So, but all right, guys. So what we've learned from this whole conversation is if there is a disc that you love and you don't feel like it's the most popular disc and you are afraid of it getting discontinued and no longer being available, figure out how to put it in a pro's hand, get them to love it, get them to get a signature disc on it, revamp the popularity of that disc, and you will be set for a very long time. So that's the end of what we got today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for Derek for letting me set up in his house and being here with me today. He has been very busy. Again, if you guys enjoy it, like, share, subscribe to the Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and help keep just sharing everything around. Until next time, keep sharing this Trilogy love with the world. See ya.